Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Amen. We continue today our focus on stewardship by turning to Psalm 24. Psalm 24 has been christened as the stewardship psalm by many, largely because of its opening verse. The earth is the Lord's, and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it. Or as the International Commission on the English Liturgy has paraphrased it, God owns this planet and all its riches. This is the basic claim of Christian stewardship, that everything we have, our money, our time, our talents, our very lives, belongs ultimately to God, and that we are stewards entrusted with these lives and possessions to use them for God's purposes. As the familiar hymn goes, we give thee but thine own, whatever the gift may be. All that we have is thine alone, a trust, O Lord, from thee. We use stewardship language so often in church, especially during the month of October, that I think sometimes we forget how radical this claim is. Stewardship flies in the face of concepts like ownership, private property, my right to do what I want with what is mine. It topples any illusions we might have of meritocracy. As Christians, we confess that we have not earned the things we have, but rather everything that we have received in this world is a gracious gift from God. If all that sounds a little un-American, it's because, well, it is. This is a remarkably countercultural way to interact with the material world. To say that nothing that we have is really ours. Not just our possessions, right? But our lives, our gifts, our time, our daily existence. The essence of who we are belongs not to us, but to God. This is a radically humbling way to live if we take this message seriously. And it's also a little bit liberating to right-size ourselves and name us as we really are, creatures of a loving Creator God, radically dependent upon God's grace. And God is gracious and generous and kind. That is simply God's nature. So we and everyone else, righteous and unrighteous alike, receive all that we have as a gift from God's loving hand. But there are some church thinkers asking if stewardship language is actually useful anymore. And they usually cite one of two reasons. The first is that stewardship has been a little overused in church speak. We have the stewardship committee, the stewardship campaign, stewardship season, stewardship Sunday, minutes for stewardship, etc. And they say that this overuse has cheapened the word, reduced its meaning to simply church money things, which means that some people are going to tune out as soon as they hear the word stewardship, and they'll miss all the good stuff. I don't really buy that argument. I don't think we should stop using a word just because we don't know what it means. I think maybe that's a sign that we should learn what the word means, reclaim it, and better educate ourselves as to the deep and drastic claims that stewardship makes upon us. But the other argument against stewardship language is one I do find compelling. This argument is that while stewardship tells us that everything belongs to God, it doesn't tell tell us what to do about it. As church business thinker Mark Sampson puts it, stewardship identifies the source, but not the direction. Stewardship makes a theological claim, but it leaves us wanting some sort of instructions for living. And that problem, well, I think that's true. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, great, but so what? The psalmist does not answer the so what of stewardship. What exactly should we do with our stuff? But while Psalm 24 provides no answer, I couldn't quite bring myself to believe that the Bible as a whole does not answer that question. So I went looking. And I found several answers, some of which feel, admittedly, a little less than practical for our everyday lives. For example, many times Jesus tells disciples to sell all they have and follow him, which most likely we cannot or will not do. But I did find one biblical answer that felt realistic and compelling. And that is the text we just heard from the book of Deuteronomy. Moses' instructions to the Hebrew people on how to give their tithes. Deuteronomy describes the practice of tithing, or taking the first tenth of our harvest, what our work produces, and giving it back to God. And that in itself is a whole nother sermon for another day, where that biblical directive comes from, why 10%, etc., etc. For now, suffice it to say that modern church society did not make this stewardship stuff up. But what struck me this week about this text is that it gives very specific and practical instructions for how we as worshipers can give our tithes back to God. And these are instructions that stand the test of time so well that they speak not only to the Hebrew people, but can also tell us, a 21st century congregation, what to do with the money that comes in the offering plate. First, Moses says, take your offering to the temple and eat there in the presence of the Lord your God, you and your household rejoicing together. This is worship and fellowship. It's a potluck, y'all. Our Reformed Christian worship today looks a little different from ancient Jewish temple sacrifice, but the basic idea is the same. Come into God's presence, give thanks and praise, and then feast with your community. Second, Moses instructs, as for the Levite residents in your town, do not neglect them, for they have no allotment or inheritance with you. That one takes a little bit more explaining. The Levites are one of the 12 tribes of Israel, and they are the tribe tasked with working in the temple. They assist with priestly duties, with music, education, temple upkeep. And because they were assigned this special duty, the Levites did not receive an apportionment of land like all the other tribes did. So they did not have land to work. They could not grow food to feed themselves or bring sacrifices to the temple. So all the other tribes, the worshipers are instructed to feed the Levites. Make sure they have enough. Provide for those who work in the temple. And finally, Moses instructs the Hebrews to use their tithes to feed not only those Levites, but also the resident aliens, the orphans, and the widows in your towns, that they may come and eat their fill. Care for the foreigners, the poor, the needy, people people in your land who don't have food with which to feed themselves. Moses makes it pretty simple, really. Giving to God looks like three things. 1, corporate worship and fellowship. 2, providing for those who make worship possible. And 3, taking care of the poor and the vulnerable. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it. God is the true owner of all things, and this is what it looks like to be faithful stewards. To give God's things back to God. It's almost kind of funny to me how easily these simple stewardship instructions translate into our present-day church context. Make possible worship and fellowship, provide for the staff, care for those in need. Actually, I think you could go line by line through our budget and assign each expense to one of these three instructions. Electric bill, make worship possible. Payroll expenses, provide for the staff. Mission budget, deacons fund, care for those in need. Some line items might actually fit into multiple categories, right? Are building maintenance expenses making worship possible? Yes. Or when we think of all the groups that meet in our building throughout the week, are they providing for those in need? Also, yes. Friends, I think this might be the so what of stewardship. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it. Great. So what do we do with our stuff? We give it back to God. How? We make worship possible. We pay the staff. We care for people in need. That's what stewardship is all about, Charlie Brown. Except there's one more thing that compels us in this text. And that is the word rejoicing. Did you notice? Rejoicing, that's the word that Moses uses to describe what we do together in the presence of God. It's not worship, it's not fellowship, it's rejoicing. Invite the Levites and the poor to join you at the feast because joy should be shared. Bring in the widows and the orphans and the aliens. Without them, the joy is not complete. The purpose of gathering is not worship as much as it is joy. Maybe that is the real so what of stewardship. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it. What do we do to give back to God? Why do we give back to God? Perhaps the answer to both is simple.